man, I shouldn't be nervous about this. It's not like I haven't shot something before, but I'm doing something new today. Hey, fellow yarn wranglers, and welcome to what I consider my first official podcast. If you don't know me, my name is Carrie. I go by Carrie Craft Geek, and I have been knitting for most of my life now. I've been knitting for over 20 years. I also crochet. I really enjoy Tunisian crochet in particular. I am starting to become a hand spinner. I have gotten into weaving. I pretty much, if you could take fiber and you can spin it into yarn, I want to play with it. I have had a YouTube channel for a few years now, and I wanted to do something that was a little less formal, a little less entertainment, and a little more just conversation. I could show off things that I've been working on, recent projects, whips, finished objects, but also kind of talk about some other things tangential to them, things that I'm enjoying, watching, listening to, etc., while I make pretty things with pretty string and kind of the stories around what I make. We'll see how all of this evolves. I'm really kind of developing this idea, and I just hope that all y'all out there enjoy it. So on today's episode, I'm going to show you what is currently on my needles, which is a larger project for me, and how that has been going. And I'm going to show off my very first spin to knit finished object. Yes, I've actually spun enough usable yarn to have a finished knitting project. I'm very proud of it, so I will talk about that as well. So let's go ahead and jump into my work in progress, what is on my knitting needles. Currently, I'm working on a top-down yoke sweater. This is called the Ethereal Sweater by Carol E. Herman. If you are familiar with my recent video, Knitting Bad Habits, this is the sweater that I was working on during that Make With Me video. The yarn that I am working with is Cloudborn Shetland yarn. It is a fingering weight yarn. It's 100% wool, non-superwash. Unfortunately, this yarn is discontinued because Cloudborn was the in-house brand for the OG Craftsy site. Craftsy, the video library and the classes were bought by another company, so you can still get those videos, although I hear that it's not fantastic now. But all of the Cloudborn yarns and supplies and everything are discontinued now. But I will have the pattern information and what yarn I used and all of that for the various projects down in my description box. Some of these will have clearly marked affiliate links, so if you utilize one of my affiliate links or Buy Mea Coffee or leave me a SuperThanks, it is so greatly appreciated. It really does help support my channel. But back to the yarn. So the sweater features a two-color work section in the yoke, and I chose a heathered gray and a medium cool-toned blue. When I got this, I bought this online on yarn.com, and I was very hopeful that this gray would be kind of a cooler gray to go with the cool blue, but in fact, it has some I think some yellow undertones to it. It's a little warmer, and it's always a little tricky pairing gray with other colors, because if you have a gray with a warmer, yellower undertone in it, a lot of times if you pair that with a cool tone color, the gray can almost start looking dirty and muted and muddy. And so when I saw the gray yarn come out of the box, I was like, oh darn. So I'm sorry, I feel like I sound my granny from Kentucky right now. Oh darn it. But I was worried that this gray and the blue wouldn't mix well together, but actually I think it's turned out fine. Or at least my husband and my sister have assured me multiple times that it looks good. I don't normally doubt my color selections, but honestly, I really, really want this project to be a success. This is the first time I am making a yoke sweater. I've worked another project a little like stuffed toy elephant that actually used the same principles of a yoke sweater. So I have done the basic techniques, but I am now applying it to an actual garment. I've got to say, the struggle bus has been real with the beginning of this yoke. It has been an adventure, and I think this is definitely a piece of knitwear where I'm always going to look at it and remember when, you know? And Tien's remembers when. No, Pepperidge Farms. Pepperidge Farms remembers when. The ethereal sweater remembers when. So the yoke features a two-color color work section that begins with vertical stripes in the collar that then transitions into a two-color honeycomb slip stitch pattern. Starting the pattern, everything was fine. You know, I cast it on no problem, and I did this stranded color work vertical stripes. And that was really fun to work. Although I did find myself constantly kind of messing around with how I was handling my yarn. Traditionally, when I do stranded color work, I carry yarn in both my left and my right hand because I can knit both quote unquote English style and continental style. But I was kind of playing around. I was playing around with carrying both yarns in my right hand. I tried carrying both yarns in my left hand for a little bit. So there's probably a little bit of unevenness in some of the sections, but I'm really confident that that little bit of uneven tension in a couple spots will even out in vlocking. Anyway, that 1x1 vertical stripes then goes into this honeycomb slip stitch pattern. And oh, I need a breath. I need a sip of coffee actually before I get into this. So the first 60 rows of this slip stitch honeycomb pattern, I probably frogged back probably 3 or 4 times because I kept misreading the pattern. When I started, I had a choice to make when reading the pattern because the repeat is both charted and written. But one of the quirks in how this pattern is written is that the first round of the repeat, of the vertical repeat, isn't in the chart. You have to read the written directions to know what to do with the first row. So it was like, well, I'm going to have to refer to the written directions. Why don't I just read the directions instead of kind of going back and forth between the chart and the directions? And let me tell you, this thought process led me astray. The stitch repeat was written so that it exactly matched how it was charted. And if you don't know a lot about repeats, you may not understand what I'm about to say. But what the written direction did was it basically split the repeats. The first row was basically knit 2, slip 2, knit 2, right? And if you read that correctly, it's going to be 4 knit stitches between 2 slip stitches. When I looked at the chart later, when I was trying to figure something else out, I realized the mistakes that I had made. I forgot to go back to the beginning of the repeat, and I turned a 6-stitch repeat into a 4-stitch repeat. And then I was like, well, crap. And there was no way to fix this other than to frog everything back right up to the collar. It is 100% on me that this happened, okay? It is on me. But the way the pattern was written kind of contributed to it. And so finally what I ended up doing was I went through the pattern and I rewrote the direction for myself. Sometimes going through that process is actually just the act of rewriting it forces me to kind of concentrate on the direction, and then I get the nuances of what is going on. But that's why I really like charts, because I'm not always the most careful reading written directions. But I know charts don't work for everybody. I know there's people who struggle with charts. If you struggle with charts, I understand. Although I do have a YouTube video that breaks down the basics of reading charts and how they work. The video is called Knitting Secrets Revealed, What Every Knitter Needs to Know About Charts. I will plug that video right now. Anyway, after frogging back the first 60 rows 4 or 5 times, I finally got the whole pattern. And I was then off to the races on the yoke section. Until it was time for me to split the yoke for the sleeves. And then that became its own problem. I'm telling you, this yoke section is full of like just so many mistakes that I made. So the first mistake I made was I got to the end of the last slip stitch section and I just was knitting along as though I was going to do another slip stitch section. And then I checked my pattern and I realized that I was actually supposed to split the yoke for the sleeve. So I was like, well, great. Untink that whole row. And it was 580 stitches at that point. So I undo that row of knitting and I start splitting for the sleeves. If you've never worked a yoke sweater before, you knit in the round until it is time to take some of the stitches that you started with and put them on waste yarn to be worked later as part of the sleeves. Got everything on. I was like, okay, great. Now we're good. Got everything going. Did a couple of rounds of the body. And I'm like, okay, we're cooking with gas now. And then I decided to try it on. I decided to go ahead, and this is the advantage of working a top-down sweater, is that in the round, you can actually try it on as you knit. So I tried it on. I was like, this doesn't fit. The armhole depth is wrong. So I did what I should have done before I split for the armholes, and I looked at the directions. And the pattern said that the yoke should be, for my size, the yoke should be 10¼ inches. Well, I was about an inch short. So, frogged back again. And I ended up adding a half repeat of the slip stitch pattern to the yoke to get it to 10 inches. So it was an easy modification to do, but it was like, oh man, so much frogging. I think the only thing that kind of got me through all the frogging was in the midst of working on this yoke, I discovered Chapel Roan. Her song, Good Luck Babe, kind of like hit TikTok from her performance at Coachella. That song for a good week and a half lived rent-free in my head. Look, I'm a Gen Xer. I may be too old to go to a Chapel Roan concert. People might, like the youngins there, might look at me odd, but I am a fan. She's fun and she's vibrant, and I have to be a little careful. I have to make sure I don't start singing her lyrics when my daughter is around because, I like, she has this line, I heard you like magic. I have a wand and a rabbit, and it is not about stage magic. She is the soundtrack of this sweater right now. Good Luck Babe was definitely the theme for the yoke section. I did have my hands in my head many times going, what have I done? Then it got into Hot to Go at the beginning of the body section. And right now in my head is a lot of Pink Pony Club. So yeah, I am loving Chapel Roan. So that is what is on my needles currently. I'm making really good progress, but I really don't know how much longer it's going to take me to finish this because, well, I've never knit a yoke sweater before. And you never know when I'm going to get distracted by something else. I always have a couple different projects going on. My side project right now with my yoke sweater is actually a weaving project that I'm doing that's using up some of my very early hand spun yarn as a supplemental weft. And I'm really enjoying that. And it's actually a really good side project as I'm working on this because it's a different craft. That means that I'm not going to drop this totally. It's just sort of like, oh, I want to break from knitting, but I still want to do something. Let me go throw a few more picks on my rigid heddle loom. I would love to know in the comments what you have been working on lately. What is a favorite pattern that you've made? And what, if anything, do you watch or listen to when you are in the middle of making things? I really enjoy listening to audiobooks when I'm making things. I know there are people who can read a book while they knit. I cannot do it. I can watch TV. I can listen to an audiobook. While I knit, crochet, weave, all those things, I cannot read a book, a physical book, while doing it. So audiobooks is how I mostly consume literature now. Literature is probably being too fancy about it. This is how I consume stories. So the audiobook that I just finished is How to Solve Your Own Murder by Kristen Perrin. I so enjoyed this book. It is about a woman whose great aunt has been haunted her entire life by this fortune that she received as a teenager that she was going to be murdered. And when her niece goes up to the house for a reading of the will, if you will, her aunt has in fact been murdered. And it's just a cozy mystery. I think even though it's a cozy mystery, it is one that sort of, sometimes with cozy mysteries, it's a little bit like, there is someone who's passed away here, and it can sometimes feel a little like too delightful. But I think the book did a good job of kind of like feeling the weight of losing somebody while still being sort of a nice bit of escapist mystery. It did a really nice job of kind of moving in between the present day mystery, but also a mystery from the past that I really enjoyed. I liked the characters. It's not like a huge twist in the end, but I just found the book delightful. It's now a series, and I will most likely end up listening to the next book in the series, which I believe is called How to Seal Your Own Fate. So I really, really enjoyed that book. If you like a cozy mystery set in the English countryside, I highly recommend this book. The final project that I'm going to talk about today, I think, is the one that I'm probably most excited about because it is my first spin to knit project, and that is a hat that I have made. The pattern is the Anonium hat by Woolly Wormhead Designs. You know what? I should just look up now how to pronounce it because I don't know how to pronounce this word. Eonium. Eonium. That's how you pronounce it? I never would have gotten there. So this hat, actually this pattern is one that has been on my to-do list from last year. I had this on my stash busting list of projects in 2023, and it has now carried over in 2024. My original plan with the Eonium hat was actually to use this Lamb's Pride yarn that I've had in my stash for like 20 years. It was this gray blue kind of variegated yarn that I've always been kind of like poking around for something to do with. Although I was always a little concerned combining cables with variegated yarn. I feel like when that happens, a lot of times the cables just kind of disappear in the variegation in the colors going on. But I was gonna push forth and just see how it worked out. And if it didn't work, frog it. Then I discovered hand spinning, and then I found this Shropshire wool and started spinning it. And then my plans for the Eonium hat changed because I was like, you know what? I think I can make yarn that's going to be perfect for this hat, and I'm going to do my first spin to knit. So I decided how to learn how to spin last year. Well, actually, I first tried to learn how to spin, drop spin, a few years ago. And I mean, beginning spinner, the first spins you do are not going to be fantastic. You have to be bad at something before you can be mediocre at it. And you have to be mediocre at it before you can be okay at it. Last year, I really got serious about it and got a used spinning wheel. Her name is Jane. And I think I've reached like okay status at this point. Up to that point, I pretty much spun Corriedale. Like I had gotten a lot of Corriedale because I heard it was a really good beginner fiber to use, which it is. But I needed to expand my horizons. And through Paradise Fibers, I ended up getting some Shropshire. Shropshire was a fiber that was the first time I felt like I was spinning something where I understood what it meant when they talked about a yarn feeling rustic. Even though it was comb top, it felt a little less organized than other fibers. I could feel the lanolin in the fibers, and I was really enjoying this different experience. One of the things that was interesting when I was spinning up the Shropshire was it begged to be a thicker yarn. Like I could not get it to spin well on a higher ratio whirl on my spinning wheel. Like it wanted to be on the slowest whirl. And I was like, this wool was made for like Aran weight yarn. This wool was made for bulkier yarn. And I felt like I was being consistent enough when I was spinning this fiber that I was like, you know what? I think I can actually make usable yarn with this. And I know the perfect project to pair it with, and that is this hat project, the Eonium hat by Woolly Wormhead Design. So I've done it. I have made yarn that I can knit with. And I love this hat. It feels very like winter with me. Like I'm not a snow bunny. I am not one who's going to go up into the mountains and go skiing. But if for some reason I was to ever go to Big Bear and hang out at the cabin, because I wouldn't go skiing, but hang out in the cabin and drink hot cocoa, this is the hat I would bring with me. It just has that feel to it. And I think it's because of this yarn. This yarn reads like rustic, snowy winters. So useful for me living in Southern California. I don't care. I will wear this hat. I love this hat.
So I should probably describe the actual hat. It is a tam. So it starts off with the brim, then you get a big increase row, and then it moves into the body of the hat. For this hat, the brim is a 2x4 ribbing pattern.
This is like my fourth Woolly Wormhead hat that I have made. And she with ribbing usually calls for doing twisted knit stitches, which is a way of sort of getting nice tension with ribbing, because sometimes with ribbing the knit stitches can look a little wonky because of the nature of pearls and knits, and it's a whole thing. If you want me to do a video about it, I will. But especially because it was going into this cable pattern where the stitches weren't going to be twisted, I decided to go ahead and just do regular knit stitches instead of twisted stitches, which I'm glad I did. I like that choice.
As for the body of the hat,
it is a cable pattern, but it doesn't look like traditional kind of Aran sweater cables the way that you normally think about them.
Instead, the pattern looks more like a diamond trellis and the stitches traveling across a pearl background. And it's really pretty, but my favorite part is the crown.
The decreases bring these diamond motifs together into a swirl, and you end up with what feels like, the way I would describe it, it feels like this swirling lattice at the crown, and it's really beautiful. And it was a surprise to me because when I was purchasing this pattern, the pattern showed the front with the cables, right? But I didn't see a picture of the crown. And I think the crown of this hat is absolutely stunning.
So overall, I love this hat. It's going to be an all-time favorite on my list, but I think what makes it most special is the fact that I knitted with yarn that I actually made.
This was the first time I was knitting with hand spun, and people talk about that, oh, it feels so different knitting with hand spun versus commercial yarn. I was like, how different can it be? Now I know how different it can feel. There is more liveliness and springiness. It's more springy. That's how I would describe it. It's more dynamic and springy with the hand spun yarn. Commercial yarn, it's a little bit more limp. But I think the other thing is the hand spun yarn just had a lovely sponginess and loftiness to it. And I think that worked perfectly for these cables. So to say that I am now in love with hand spinning yarn, yes, I am. And I'm really looking forward to Tour de Fleece because I have no interest in the Tour de France, but I want to be part of the Tour de Fleece. So I feel like I have talked a lot this afternoon about what I've been working on. my finished objects and some of the things that I've been enjoying and listening to while I make things. And I'll be sharing more with you as the future podcasts come to be. If you would like to tell me what you are working on, any thoughts you have, I'd love to hear about them in the comments below. If there's something that you're like, I'd love to hear about this in a podcast, or listening to your podcast, I'd love a video where you just talked about this technique or what have you, please let me know down in the comments below and we can keep this conversation going. Also, down in the description box, you will find all of the information of the patterns that I use, the yarns that I use, where I source them from, etc., etc. Some of these will have clearly marked affiliate links. So if you do some shopping with one of those affiliate links, I might earn a small commission. And this helps support what I do here on YouTube. So utilize one of my affiliate links, leave me a super thanks, or buy me a coffee. It is so greatly appreciated. Thank you so much. If you have not already, please make sure that you subscribe to my channel and give this podcast video a thumbs up. Liking videos, sharing videos, commenting on videos does help support the channel. As well, of course, the most important thing, which is just hit subscribe so you always know when I upload a new video, start a live stream, do a podcast, what have you. That is it for me today. I hope that you have a wonderful day, evening, weekend, weeknight, whenever you may be watching this. And as always, happy health and happy making. Bye.